Hello and welcome back to Two Peas on a Pod with me, Mark Phillips, and my long-term co-conspirator, Giles Pegram. Today we're talking about face-to-face fundraising. That's something that some of you will love and others will question. But to understand its strengths and also its limitations, it requires more than just a few anecdotes or some gut instinct. It needs data, experience, and above all, honesty about what works and what doesn't. So that's why today we've invited Dominic from Gather Campaigns to come along and chat all things face-to-face. Dom has been involved in the technique for over 20 years, and he's seen it all, from its rapid growth in the early 2000s through press scrutiny, self-regulation efforts, and also the post-COVID recovery. He's worked on the best campaigns, and he knows what differentiates them from those that fail. So in this conversation, we're going to dig into why does face-to-face still attract a questioning glance or two? What separates high-performing campaigns from ones that just churn out poor quality sign-ups with very high attrition and little long-term value, and where the model might go next? We'll also look at how things have changed over the years, how face-to-face is much more respectful of the public, and also looking at what role training, messaging and payment methods play in shaping donor experience and retention. And also we'll look at why so few charities are investing in decent stewardship after the initial sign-up. Now, face-to-face when done well can be a fantastic fundraising technique, but when done badly, it can be expensive and, let's say, not so brilliant. This episode is all about understanding the difference. So, let's get started. Hello and welcome back to Two Peas on a Pod with me, Mark Phillips from Blue Frog Fundraising in the driving seat today, and also with my co-conspirator, Giles Pegram.
Hello.
And we've got a wonderful guest today. We're going to be speaking to someone, not just somebody who's great at fundraising, a friend. Perhaps I think of him almost as the nicest person in fundraising. Lovely to work with. We are going to be, and when I tell you we're going to be talking about face-to-face today, you might know who I'm going to mention, and it is Dominic from Gather. Are you Gather Fundraising or Gather or?
Well, we're Gather Campaigns, Mark.
Gather
we
Campaigns.
cover a wide range of activity, but thank you very much.
Anyway, it is lovely to see you, Dom, and we're going to be chatting today everything face-to-face, and I'm going to hand over to Giles to kick us off.
Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you for coming in, Dom.
My pleasure, Giles. Lovely to see you both as always.
It's nice for you, but you're at the kind of the centre of the dark underbelly of fundraising. You know that everybody cringes when they see a face-to-face fundraiser, and what you're doing, you, Dom, is you're training people to interrupt people in the street and ask for money. How are you okay with that?
I think if that's one interpretation of how face-to-face can be viewed, and I think what's been interesting, and we've all known each other a long time, and Mark and I were talking before about obviously having worked together, I think since 2002 on different projects, and I think even right from the early days of kind of face-to-face or face-to-face fundraising really kind of taking off in this country, and right the way through to kind of different periods between or over the last kind of 25 to 30 years. I think you're right. There is a bit of a kind of initial reaction or a fairly deep held view about face-to-face, both kind of inside our own industry and outside, with the general public, that I might not want to speak to that person, or that feels a little bit tough, being asked. I don't want to be interrupted. And I understand that. I think any form of fundraising that essentially involves a direct ask, from someone to another person, whether that's face to face, telephone, or whatever it may be, may elicit that sort of reaction. But I think what we often miss is that that may be the initial reaction or the initial feeling. I think if you were to survey people that had that interaction, whether that be on the street, whether that be at a venue, whether that be on your own front doorstep, I think I know that you happen to get a very different response, in terms of the before and after. I think once you've had the chance to engage, in a human conversation, with someone that cares about what they're doing, that can communicate, one of the hundreds, if not thousands, of causes that have been represented, down the years. I think then people get a sense of, really how strong and important this type of fundraising, this type of communication can be. Because remember, we're not just talking about fundraising, we're talking about communication as well, and really understanding, some areas of society, some areas of or organisations that do great things both here and abroad, that need to be heard, and this is an important vessel to do that.
I think, forgive the first question.
It's fine.
Playing devil's advocate, I'm actually a massive fan of face-to-face, and I'd like to come on to it a bit later, but a lot of my work has been with kind of major donors, full stop appeal, etc., etc. Yeah. And all my experience is that a face-to-face conversation is going to be better than a telephone conversation or a mail conversation or, an inside-out TV appeal. So it seems to me that face-to-face essentially is a good thing. It's the way that good fundraising takes place. And I'd like to explore a bit about how things have changed from the kind of those dark days of people being employed on a commission basis, etc., etc. But can we go back to my early days of fundraising, which is pre-Olive Cook, where I was running a very major IG operation. We'd be testing all of their channels all the time, and people would change and split in and out. But the one consistent was face-to-face fundraising. And what we found was that wherever we went, you would get an immediate attrition. There'd be an immediate cancellation of about maybe 50%. It's probably a lot lower now. But once you'd done that, then the ongoing attrition was extremely good, better than any other channel. And the average gift was higher than any other channel. And yet people talk about there being high attrition. Mm-hmm. So were we the exceptions in getting that really good reaction from face-to-face, or were people somehow aggregating that immediate attrition with the long-term attrition? What was going on?
Yeah, I think before I cover that, just going back to a point you mentioned earlier in the question, or before the question there, just around kind of dark days, and we can talk about how people are paid and what have you. Just to say, I don't, I've run kind of operations businesses based on lots of different kind of payment models, and again, that's a kind of popular misconception that it's all about how people are paid. Of course, how you incentivize people and remunerating people fairly is extremely important, I think, in any line of work. But it's overly simplistic to say there's one way that is right and one way that is wrong. I think it's all about essentially how you set something up, how you manage it, how you oversee it, and how that evolves over time. So just to make that kind of quick point before we move on.
But I'd like to come back to that after. But just do the pre-Olive Cook thing first, and then we'll come back. Absolutely. And I'll let Mark. Yeah. Maybe I'll let Mark have a word.
And I think it's an important thing. What you mentioned about kind of perceptions around face-to-face fundraising campaigns and their performance. It's those kind of assumptions still exist to this day, to a certain degree. In that, it's essentially with face-to-face, you will generally see, as you're saying, a higher level of dropout. Right at the start. Before that kind of attrition curve, if you like, evens out pretty quickly. Providing those people have been communicated well with at the start of the relationship, then that should absolutely be the case. And as long as kind of ongoing stewardship and communications are on point, then that should absolutely be that should be absolutely be what you see. And I think NSPCC had a big advantage to big you up. When the Full Stop campaign was in full flight, it was very well managed in that regard. The different kind of component parts of the face-to-face fundraising campaign knitted together nicely. There was a clear message. There was a clear ongoing message once you'd already once you did decide as a supporter to support the cause. Now, of course, that was that was kind of further solidified, if you like, by the NSPCC brand. But I've worked on many campaigns, for large brand organisations where there might not have been quite that commitment, to making sure all of those different component pieces, kind of knitted together. So I think, yes, the organisation did achieve good results, but that was also down to, essentially an ongoing effort to make sure that was the case. These things don't just happen because you happen to think you're a big household name as a charity. There has to be commitment from, for all elements when it comes to a campaign. So I think that's an important message, I think, to any fundraiser, any organisation that are considering face-to-face or considering getting back into face-to-face at this juncture. I think don't be discouraged by, if you don't perceive yourself not to be a kind of household name, and if you are a better known organisation, then don't rest on those laurels. Make sure that you are doing everything that you can, to work with the teams that are representing you, and to make sure that the messaging, that they are communicating on your behalf is then obviously supported further down the line. So
if we were successful in 2010
Yeah.
and getting face-to-face as being the best acquisition channel,
yeah.
and since things have improved since then, is there any reason why a charity shouldn't see face-to-face as possibly their potentially most successful acquisition channel now?
Yeah, I think that there is at this juncture now in 2025. I think there remains very significant potential in face-to-face. I mean, if we're talking about our market in the UK, if we look at all areas or all kind of individual giving channels, have their own challenges. We know that the digital space is pretty saturated. We've seen that with TV campaigns as well. Obviously telephone fundraising in terms of scale isn't what it was. If we were to go back, as I say, further into our past, and that that's not to do down any forms of fundraising, because I think all of these channels have their place essentially, and that is always the way it should be viewed, unless there's a very good reason not to. But yeah, I mean, I think if we're talking about face to face, the market capacity that we see at the moment is nowhere near what it could be, and and I'm not saying that I think it should be 5 times the size of what it currently is, but the reality is that over the past kind of 25 years, we have seen much greater numbers of fundraisers on the streets knocking at your door, in whatever form, and I think that in terms of overall capacity, the market is probably is operating a little bit below what it could do. So I think if when looking at kind of face-to-face as an opportunity and as an opportunity over the next couple of years, I think absolutely it should form part of any organisation that is able to is able to invest, is able to kind of run with the concept of a relatively strong return on investment. Then face-to-face should come into the mix. Now, there are challenges with that. That the market isn't operating or isn't quite as big as it potentially could be for reasons. For kind of challenges around the kind of recruitment of staff and kind of operational issues that that would challenge face to face. But on a very broad level, if you're looking at it in 2025, it represents, or it remains an excellent opportunity to really build capacity for organisations via both one-time and regular donations.
Can I ask one more question?
Giles, you can ask as many questions as you like. We've got plenty of time. Carry on.
But I like lists, and I'm working through my list, and you hate lists. So, I've got one more question, then I'll hand over to Mark. Back in the day, street fundraisers were called chuggers, and even within organisations, even within the NSPCC, fundraisers would talk about chuggers in a quite normal way. And I remember thinking, don't they realise that chuggers mean charity muggers, and that is not it's a pejorative term, it's a nasty way of calling it, and yet we somehow accepted being called charity muggers. Don't like that. So what's changed in the last, since Olive Cork? What's changed in terms of training, the way you deal with your teams, the way they deal with the people on the street? How has face-to-face fundraising moved away from the rules about how many times you have to walk people past to now when it's more about relationship building, etc., etc.? How has it changed?
Well, I think again, just to kind of take a sort of one step back, I think that the Olive Cook situation. It's 10 years ago now, isn't it? And I think fundraising, not face to face, fundraising in general or professional fundraising, certainly was dragged to quite a kind of dark place. And it seemed to be, it was relatively convenient, for government and media at that time to I don't know, kind of create a real agenda, around professional fundraising in general. Because remember, it was about direct mail, it encompassed telephone, and ultimately face to face as well. And I don't think that was particularly fair, at the time. There wasn't any particular kind of nefarious practices that were going on with face to face. That warranted that level of attention. But I think in many ways face to face did a pretty good job of kind of self-regulation up to that point. The PFRA had been established fairly early on. As kind of particularly street fundraising. Grew very, very quickly. If we go back to kind of 2001, 2002, those sorts of, or that era. So there were kind of operational practicalities around making sure that sites weren't overused, and you didn't have kind of 100 fundraisers turning up on one street and these sorts of things. So the both charities and agencies that were around at the time, kind of worked very well collaboratively, up until that point. And in 2015, you still had a PFRA, that was separate from the Institute of Fundraising, obviously now Chartered Institute of Fundraising. But yeah, there was a bit of a kind of frenzied approach, in my opinion, at the time, to then kind of merge the two organisations, because it was somehow seen that was a kind of better idea in terms of self-regulation. And then, of course, the fundraising regulator was also, kind of established around that time. But so for me, Olive, that time wasn't really a kind of watershed in terms of establishing better practice with face-to-face. Again, it was there wasn't really an understanding around how face-to-face had regulated itself, had established good kind of procedures, guidelines, and rule books for the best way to operate. But it was what it was. And really over the past 10 years, the channel has continued to evolve. Now, as I say, the kind of self-regulatory aspect, is kind of linked to the Chartered Institute and the compliance director at there. But of course, any face-to-face agency or charity that are involved in the channel should also have a relationship with the fundraising regulator as well, based around kind of good practice, and of course if there are any issues that need to be investigated, then there needs to be very much an open dialogue there, which I believe there is amongst most participants in the channel. So I think that whole environment has evolved again. Now remember, there was also the break of the kind of pandemic over those years as well, and that of course was a very worrying time, a terribly worrying time for everyone and anyone. It didn't really matter what your walk of life. But if we apply it to face-to-face fundraising, clearly no human contact, and face-to-face don't go very well together. So there was a huge amount of uncertainty as to would the channel survive, full stop. Is this something that is just gone forever now? Given how tentative people are likely to be, as and when we do come out the other side. So what was interesting at the time when we did start to kind of make those tentative steps, back into having some activity, and of course, you've got the protective visors, you're making sure that you're having to stand 2 meters apart and all this kind of stuff. The reception from members of the public was overwhelmingly positive. I was really quite taken aback. For the first time I can remember, there was actually unsolicited messages of support coming in all of the time. It's great to see you back out and about. It was really nice to talk to the fundraiser today. Just to have that conversation. It's we understand it's so important for the charities now. It must have been such a hard time for them, to kind of get back out. And face to face, ironically became a real. It was really at the forefront of getting back out there and that communication, which, as I said, a couple of months earlier, I would have struggled to see. So, I think, there's, again, kind of getting back to the original question of kind of post Olive Cook, I think things have evolved, in that space. There've been huge challenges, that have come along. But again, I think, the channel itself and the people involved have displayed a real kind of resilience and creativity, and and created some very positive moments over those last 10 years.
I've got some reflections on that, but meanwhile, no. You've been listening in for the last few minutes, quite a few minutes. What do you take out of what we've been saying so far?
Yeah, obviously, we got involved back at Blue Frog very early on in face to face. We were working with Gift and Home, and I think at Blue Frog we named you both, didn't we? Gift and Home. Did we come up with that?
I'm not sure you came up with Home. I might dispute that.
Oh, we definitely came up with Gift. I think we came up with Listen as well as names. But yeah, it was always a core part of our work. Now, obviously, it was a different time back then, but I think like today, it was there were. I don't know what you're finding today, Dom, but I sometimes speak to some of my clients, and they because they've got a relatively hard sell, they're struggling to actually find teams to take them on. Mm-hmm. They'll go out, they'll do 6 months, and then the agency say we're not doing. Yeah, there's some more. There are some tough asks out there. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts at the moment? If that we're in this post-COVID world where in effect it's constantly chaotic. This is what donors tell us in research, that we're in this chaotic world. They want to protect things that they love and they value. Charities are often very high. on those lists, and people who are working for charities often get a much greater sort of like positive glow from that association. So what do you find just broadly are the causes that are easier to raise money for at the moment, and which are the ones that are tough? And it might not be causes, it might be how much you're asking for, it might be the types of way you're asking people to support.
Sure, yeah, I mean, I think look, undoubtedly, there are some as we know, we've all been in fundraising long enough yes, there will be causes that, are immediately slightly easier to communicate, and, that's important or can be a great benefit to a face-to-face campaign because, you are trying to build rapport quickly. It doesn't really matter, in any kind of face-to-face scenario, that's what you're trying to do. But what I would say is that, and kind of going back to something I said earlier about, not just relying on something you perceive to be well known or, understood by the potential supporter already. I think you have to, I think, now, and one of the great things about, being in 2025, as opposed to maybe back in 2002, is that, we have the ability to be a lot more flexible, in terms of, what we're actually asking for, and maybe matching how someone may want to support versus just us having a kind of one track ask that we're making. So obviously certainly in the UK, face to face has been very much centred for most of its kind of lifetime on regular giving via direct debit, and that's been a hugely important source of income as we've established. For many charities in the UK. But, I think, now if we look at, how, the uncertainty that people feel, perhaps sometimes, they don't want to commit to something that they perceive as ongoing, as long term, particularly, younger people whose lifestyles might be a little bit more, might be a little bit more transient. Then you have the ability to offer a one-off donation, which is very, very easy to kind of capture, to offer, to process, very, very easy. So I think with face-to-face and that ability to be flexible at the point of that communication is a great strength alongside. If you put that against organisations that you might think, okay, well, look, it's a bit of a tough ask. Are people going to really understand it? Well, what really helps with that is if you can talk to people about, not just the cause, but how they might want to support. So they don't feel like they're just trying to kind of fit with your agenda. If they can feel like, okay, well, this is genuinely a two-way conversation. Then I think that opens up great potential for the types of organisations that might feel that their proposition is not particularly universal or is difficult to communicate. I mean, an example might be, we worked on behalf of a great organisation that are called Youth PWR, essentially, that are all about kind of preventing knife crime with young individuals, from kind of inner city environments. An organisation, without the resources, the means to invest in a kind of large scale, or even kind of medium scale face-to-face campaign in a traditional sense. So, you look at something like that and you say, okay, well, what about if we run a kind of capacity building campaign? So, forget about investment in regular giving. We will run a one-off giving campaign, and then so we'll start to build up, obviously funds, from those one-off donations, but we're also effectively building leads, new supporters. We can then communicate with them further down the line, to potentially see if they are interested in committing to the organisation on a more regular basis. And in the meantime, funds are built up, capacity is built to do that. So I think, that, yes, undoubtedly, there will always be the case that there are some organisations that are easier to communicate than others. But I think what face-to-face gives you is potentially, some moves that you can make, to help mitigate that and to really open up the playing field to organisations that may have thought, okay, well, it's that's not going to be possible for us.
And within that, if we look at your payment method, obviously DD years ago, that was all people wanted to do, and if you got one-off gifts, they weren't even charged for. I don't know if they are now, but they weren't even charged for back in the day. But obviously, what we're seeing more and more now is a recurring credit card payment, and that's giving you obviously gifts at point of sign up immediately.
Yes,
and you're getting reduced attrition. Yeah. What do you see are the reasons for that level of reduced attrition? Purely because it's a different way of giving that regular payment.
I think the fact that you make a commitment literally on the spot and you will, that first payment you will make immediately, I think makes a significant difference, in terms of just the psychology of, okay, I am now a supporter of this organisation, as opposed to, okay, something is going to come out a month down the line or whatever it may be. So I think that certainly with initial attrition, I think that is a big helping hand. I think the payments environment is, again, is evolving all of the time. So whilst, I think there are lots of benefits with recurring card at the moment, pertaining to face-to-face, we will have to see how that evolves, longer term. I still think, with direct debit, if we can look at ways, of improving kind of, processing times. If we look, it's not out of the question, for instance, to build in a kind of first payment through, another method, and then, build in the direct debit further down the line. For instance, we're looking at options with open banking, and trialing that at the moment. So, I think recurring card has been, certainly over the last kind of year to 18 months, very positive, across a whole range of campaigns, because it boosts that kind of year one return on investment. And as I say, that in terms of kind of, I suppose, donor psychology, giving psychology, you are a supporter from the get-go, which makes a difference. It helps in terms of, fundraisers, really having that confidence that, they're really signing people up. They can see the difference, there and then. So lots of positives. But yeah, we will have to see, as I say, the environment is evolving all of the time. And obviously, people are taking, have control at their fingertips, over their payments now, kind of 24/7, which again, it was, more complicated than that, or certainly more difficult than that years ago. So, we'll continue to see how that evolves.
Because when we speak to donors about, about regular giving, in our research and in terms of direct debits, the challenging point for any charity that's got a DD with a donor is when that person is considering cancelling another direct debit. Yeah. And this is what they tell us. They say, "Oh, I've decided to cancel my gym. I'll have a quick look to see who else should disappear." Yeah. And that's when they're talking about those going off. When we talk to them about credit cards, I don't think many of them, particularly the donors we speak to who are slightly older, are as quite as au fait about how you cancel a recurring credit card, which I think is one point obviously in your favour. Yeah. But the other side that you've mentioned as well is about stewardship and onboarding. Yeah. Now, years ago, if we go back to those very, very early days of face-to-face, and this is face-to-face in the 2000s. Yeah. Many of you might not realise that we can go back and see face-to-face fundraising back over 100 years ago. I'll put some pics up of the YMCA and the Lightning Canvas, which goes back into the the turn of the century, particularly in the UK. But one of the points that was made by
which century?
Yes, the previous century. Sorry, me and Giles.
At least.
We've still got 1 foot in the 20th century here. But the other, so going back to that point, in those early days, some of those early agencies would say, just stay quiet.
Sure.
Don't remind them that they're giving
Yeah.
if you want to reduce attrition. Now, you've come out positively and said good stewardship is essential. What do you see as good stewardship these days to actually keep somebody on board after they've signed up? What's your recommendation? What does happen next?
Well, I still think I still think that's a difficult question to answer, Mark, because
I'm full of those.
yeah, but I mean, again, I think if we look at face to face down the years, I don't think that there has been enough kind of consistency in terms of stewardship approach to really kind of point to what would deem to be a kind of gold standard in terms of retention. Now that, of course, there are examples kind of down the years, but and again, because we've now evolved to a point of, okay, payments technology has evolved. It means that we can kind of view and manage that data pretty much in real time. So in terms of kind of being able to respond, when it comes to ongoing communication, that we now have the ability to do that. Now, that, in my opinion, still there has not been enough testing or investment, not just within the UK market, really within the global kind of face-to-face market, around utilising this kind of new technology, this new access to data, to really see how that can impact ongoing communications. I mean, it's interesting. I was having a conversation with someone who's based in the States this morning, around really trying to kind of open up these ideas to American organisations that are now very much involved in face-to-face and looking at the next steps and how they really enhance their programs. And I suppose there's an assumption that because the UK market is is more mature in terms of kind of face-to-face, that there's just ongoing kind of stewardship programs that just run and exist and everyone's happy with them. Not the case. That remains not the case. So now, of course, I've kind of had my hands full with the different challenges around the recruitment of donors, kind of all the way through. But I would still say that the opportunity remains open, to look at how to use the new technology, use the data that is available to us to test different approaches. And I would I would just say that what we're starting to do is to look at how we build on those initial communications at the point of sign up, that certainly should involve verification calling still, certainly should involve some form of kind of WhatsApp or SMS messaging, to give donors the opportunity at that point of sign up or just after, to convey anything, either that they want to ask or they're not sure about, to make sure that process is as kind of reassuring as possible. But I think the door remains open, certainly on an ongoing basis to look at kind of different approaches.
But is that stuff the norm? So the norm would be, after you recruit, that you're getting the verification call, you're getting some sort of text or WhatsApp message, all good. Is that the standard that you're recommending, or are some people opting out of that because it's too expensive?
Yeah, I mean, look, there will be different approaches. I mean, certainly, most either organisations or agencies that are involved in face-to-face will have some form of verification process, at the point of recruitment. But it will vary, and obviously those contact rates will vary depending on how it's done, and again, so some will then use text-based communication, some won't. The sophistication of those will vary as well. So, yeah, there isn't really one kind of gold standard as such, but you don't really need to be a rocket scientist. If you look at, you know, the difference between, you know, a campaign whereby there's limited verification, I say verification, welcome communications really, versus one where there's nothing, you will see, you know, significantly higher attrition rates with the one that doesn't have anything.
If I just do one more point.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, one point. But, you know, within that, what is the default ongoing? Are you defaulting then to email after that? You know, not you, but I mean, is the charity, once that donor is on board, is it defaulting to emails? Are people being chucked into an email stream? Are there specific programs? What's happening?
Yeah, I think, well, and again, I think this is something, you know, that has been a kind of traditional issue with face-to-face donors, is that, you know, they can, in the main, just be put in to a standard kind of, you know, ongoing communication plan for regular donors, regardless of how they were recruited in the first place.
Or from what we see, just the email stream that comes out of that charity.
Yeah.
And so, you know, is there a structured program where people, you know, where there's testing, you know, there's looking at delivering levels of insight? Is anyone doing anything like that and measuring how that's impacting on the bottom line?
Not reliably.
No.
You know, I mean, I think, you know, again, there are, you know, there are tests, you know, there are, you know, there's kind of smaller groups of activity, you know, that will be looked at, you know, and sometimes tested against, you know, the kind of wider cohort. But there, as I said earlier, there remains an opportunity, again, you know, particularly, you know, with you know, how you can be so on top of, you know, the performance, you know, of a campaign. Now, you know, we have to do it because, you know, it's very important for us, obviously, in terms of performance management, to understand, you know, how individual fundraisers are doing, how different offices are performing in different parts of the country, you know, so that we can kind of leap on anything, you know, good, bad, or indifferent, immediately.
So, you know, on that, if we took that, you know, sort of one step further, you know, we've done a research study recently amongst regular givers, and one of the points that's coming back is they're not even looking at emails. You know, it's like, I just get so much junk, particularly the younger you go. What for example, what's the average age of if you can give me an average age?
Yeah.
You know, it used to be years ago on Face to Face that we were trying to get people 30 and over.
Sure.
What are we looking at now? What's the average age of sign up that you'll find?
Yeah, I mean, the average age would be kind of mid-40s.
Good starting age.
But yeah, it seems a bit young to me now. But yeah, I mean, average age, as you know, it can be sort of slightly misleading.
Yeah, of course.
So I guess the best way to look at it is that what we tend to, again, talking quite broadly, we would focus a little bit more on one-off donations for people under 30.
And what are you looking at prompts there? 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds? What, you know?
Yeah, so average gift levels for one-off donations would be in the region of £30.
Okay.
You know, so we you know, I mean, we've had some very significant donations in recent years, but
what's your best on the street?
I believe a £500 donation.
Gotcha. Okay.
So yeah, pretty good. Not me personally, unfortunately.
So you two have been talking a lot about verification, default. What's the thing with credit cards?
Recurring credit cards.
Okay. But outside of my sphere of knowledge, can we come back to the communication between the face-to-face fundraiser and the donor?
Yeah.
Because what I see when I go out now is, and you use the word conversation, I see face-to-face fundraisers having conversations with people, not trying to get the sign up, trying to close the deal. And that feels to me a lot different than it was 10, 20 years ago. I see people listening, I see people engaging, I see people not under pressure to get to the bottom line. And I remember, you go back to street fundraising and the not the legislation, what do you call it, the constraining, the rules and things, but you can only walk so many steps behind.
Sure.
And it all sounded terribly technical.
Yes.
And now that feels it has changed. It is now about conversations. It is now about engagement. And one of my favourite expressions is that every communication with a donor should leave them feeling better after it than before it.
Yes.
So am I being... By the way, my first question was a complete joke. Dom and I know each other well enough. I did not mean a word of it. I actually believe face-to-face fundraising is terrific. And would I be going too far in saying that even if a face-to-face fundraising conversation does not end up in a sign-up, the prospect should still go away feeling better about the charity than they did before? Would that be an unreasonable aspiration?
I think that's absolutely right, and a very important thing, and a very important thing for anyone involved in face-to-face fundraising to appreciate. I mean, I think, just to kind of broaden that point for a moment. Again, I think often face-to-face has been kind of undervalued. Because of the fixation. Understandably, campaigns need to make a return. And we're fundraisers after all. As in a financial return. But, I think charities have quite often found, or, people that work in fundraising for charities, that, okay, if they can kind of present, say, a TV campaign to the board, and obviously it can look very slick. You can talk about reach, as well as you can talk about, actual kind of, hard, pounds, shillings and pence and what have you. I think quite often they haven't quite had the ease of communicating face to face in the same way, because they're immediately, expecting kind of difficult questions or questions about risk and perception and all of these things. But actually, if you kind of flip that round a little bit, I now make sure that, in any kind of campaign review that we might deliver to a charity, that we talk very much around the reach of the campaign, as well, so those positive conversations that Giles is referring to, as well as, the people who have signed up, to a one-time or regular gift. I think that reach is extremely important. And then, when you actually start to quantify that as well, it becomes, quite impressive, I think, because, you might have 10 conversations, before actually signing someone up. But, if they are 10 good conversations, then, who knows where that may lead. So, I think it's very, very important to talk and think about the wider benefits of this activity, because they're real. And we do now quantify that as well. Again, the new applications, enable us to, record who we're, or how many conversations we're having, at what point we're getting to in the conversation. That enables us then to, to obviously look at the proposition, how that may need to change or be developed, particularly when we're looking at, new organisations and testing campaigns. So, reach, and the effectiveness of each and every conversation is extremely important on many levels.
Okay. Another difficult question. I did my research on ChatGPT, as I think I told you, and it came up with how big a name you were. It said mixed feelings about face-to-face. Some still see it as old school or intrusive, but others, like Dom's team, are redefining it as deeply human and values-based. And you spent your years not just defending it, but redefining it, and that's what we've been talking about. Is there one thing about face-to-face fundraising that you think is still not as good as it should be, and you'd really like to change, or is it all perfect?
Oh no, it's not all perfect. I mean, look, anything that involves human beings, is going to be imperfect.
So what's the one thing?
Oh, that's difficult.
I know. I told you it would be.
Yeah. It's difficult. Yeah, I mean, look, I think that ultimately, ultimately, if you could, I think it's very easy and something obviously, we have to manage and train very hard on, is just making sure that, if you're a face-to-face fundraiser, it doesn't matter in any guise, whether you're knocking on people's doors, whether you're, in a shopping centre or, working on a street site or whatever, you're going to be faced with a lot of rejection. People are occasionally going to be rude to you. And you have to develop quite a thick skin for it, or a very thick skin for it. You have to be very, very resilient to be a good face-to-face fundraiser. And I think, sometimes, individuals, unfortunately, can let themselves down by, allowing that frustration to come to the surface sometimes. And that can then create, a kind of chain reaction whereby suddenly, the charity, there may be a complaint, or the charity may not feel, as confident about the activity maybe as they had done previously. So yeah, I mean, look, it's difficult, really to kind of name, what one thing that needs improving from from the people that were involved in face to face. Apart from just making sure that 24 hours a day, you understand that you are, you're out there, you're an ambassador, you're very visible, and just to, just not let that kind of split second, let you down essentially. So, I mean, obviously that's probably asking the impossible, but, that's just the reality. And I suppose an example of, the pressure some of the guys are under sometimes. But I think, to be honest, again, sort of flipping it around a little bit, what I would really like to see change, just to some degree, again, is the perception around face-to-face, really from within our industry, not even from outside of it. I still think, and I'm being quite specific to the UK here, despite the UK being one of the the most mature face-to-face markets in the world, we have quite a significant degree of cynicism, towards the channel, and a degree of snobbery, I would say, as well. That other channels fine, I'm comfortable working on that, but face to face we're going to view slightly differently. But I think the point is, I think the face-to-face industry, the impact of it, and its potential would be enhanced if perceptions could kind of lighten, or if some of the kind of cynicism around it, or kind of certainly some of the negative viewpoints around it could lift to a degree, and it could be viewed a little bit more fairly, against the results that it can achieve, both financial, both in terms of reach, both in terms of lead generation, all of these things,
and in terms of relationship building.
Completely. And so I think that is what I would love to see change. Obviously, as you know, Giles, I've worked at the CIOF, or been part of the board there previously. I've tried to work on initiatives, via the companies that I've been involved in as well, and with charities to try and really change this. I think it is quite deeply entrenched. When I talk to people overseas, or I've been to events overseas, and I've been struck by the positivity around it, and around the potential of the channel, both from charities that are involved in it, from fundraisers that are working that are seeing new opportunities. We have a company in India. We're building a great operation out there. We're looking at an exchange program later in the year, to bring some of the guys over, to send some of the UK guys to India, to experience, working in those different countries. These sorts of things are so tremendously positive, around, the opportunities you're providing for people, grabbing with both hands. These essentially are the, they're already fundraisers, but they're potentially the managers, directors of tomorrow. So, all of that experience, that energy, we sometimes lack a little bit as I say, in our domestic market, and that I'd really like to see change.
I, in listening to the discussion and thinking about it, something's occurred to me for the first time, which is that most of what I've been talking about and asking about has been about the one-to-one relationship between the fundraiser and the person on the street. Most of what you've been talking about has been about data analysis,
Process.
Now, within most charities, I'd have thought, all charities, face-to-face fundraising is managed within the individual giving department, and the individual giving department is almost by definition dealing with mass numbers of people, mass market, mass data. You know, how does DRTV perform against door drop? How does that change compared with cold direct mail, etc.? Is there an issue? I'm going to ask this for both of you, all three of us. Is there kind of an issue about how the face-to-face, one-to-one operation fits within an IG department that is mainly full of people who deal with data and mass volumes? Oh, am I?
I think that's in terms of the discussions that we've had. The point that I'm constantly making, and it's not just this is a theory, we've proved it works time after time after time. It's not we put so much energy into the ask that we forget about demonstrating the impact of what that. And whichever medium we focus on. However we deliver that feedback, however we deliver that sense of reward, however we show donors that when you give money, you are not giving it away, you are getting something back in terms of a better society, better world, protection for something you care about, we know we do better. However, for many, many charities, it's like, I don't want to spend any money on that. I don't want to. And it's like, from my end, look, you are going to lose these donors, that they're not going to stick around. And that was, my point with Dom was that level of feedback. And what's interesting from what Dom said is we're still not doing it enough. So there might be something at the point of sign up, but what happens afterwards? The line I have, you're signing someone up to a great charity. Most charities are great in terms of what they do. They might not be big, they might not be well known, but pretty much all of them are doing something great work that any of us, if we didn't have them, we'd have to invent them. But how do I become a valued member of that organisation? And you do that afterwards. You don't necessarily do that at the point of recruitment. And so many people will talk about the fact, I signed up, I was proud of myself, and that's it. I'm just left alone. And it's that point. And what I think the point that Dom's making, which I think is really important here, is we are not focusing enough on the post-donation experience, because that is what makes the difference. And we know speed is really important there, that we get something good into someone's hands. If we take DM, for example, if we get a good thank you out within 48 hours of receiving that gift, we're twice as likely to keep that donor, twice as likely, with a great thank you, not an email that's a receipt, but a great thank you. And I think that's the point that I think that Dom's focusing on there, that we can't blame any media or medium for recruiting bad donors or having high levels of attrition if we are not investing in what is relevant to that donor from that point of sign up or that point of engagement to keep them. And I find that doesn't happen.
Can we build on that?
Build away.
We're running over a bit, but it's worth it.
We've still got 51 minutes, Giles. We can carry on for ages.
That's what I said now. Okay, so we talked a lot about sign up, and you talked a lot about the kind of post sign up.
Yeah.
And I know a lot about that in the DM world. So the thank you letter, how that goes out, etc. What is the post sign up? If you signed up on a private site initiative and you sign the form, when will be the next time you hear from the charity?
You'll get a call within, and again, I'm talking, in terms of our processes, and these will vary from charity to, with different charities, different agencies. But, what the standard for in most situations is that, you would receive a call, certainly from us, within the hour.
Within an hour?
Yes. To say thank you.
How the hell do you do that?
Well, the exchange of data is so quick now. this is the thing. You're operating in a real-time environment now. So you have the opportunity to do that. On some campaigns there may be an instantaneous verification call, but again, we've done that before. But you have to wait.
What do you mean? Sorry, a verification call.
So
I heard you talk about that, and it went over my head.
Yeah. So a welcome stroke verification call. So for instance,
So if I get that phone call an hour after I signed up,
yeah.
Would the phone call say, I've just heard from so-and-so in the North Finchley Shopping Centre that you've signed up, and I just wanted to say how much we...
Yes, we appreciate that, and can I just check that you're happy with your experience, and and can I just check a couple of points, and it may be, for instance, that we would check the opt-in preferences, how they want to continue to hear from the organisation, any questions that they might have, at that point. They will also receive from us a supporter experience survey as well, so they have the opportunity then to rank their experience, and that's quite important to us because we do see, obviously, we can leap on any, on anything that we see there that needs to be acted upon. But again, this is kind of wrapped up in the recruitment process. That whole kind of recruitment experience for the supporter. Then further down the line, I think again that the field remains relatively open in terms of what the kind of what the standards should be in terms of ongoing communications now.
But let me double check. When I sign up mystery shopping online, and I make that decision to make the donation, and I press the click button, I'm then asked a whole series of questions like the ones you've just asked, and I don't feel I was about to have a really good experience, and suddenly now I'm being asked all kinds of questions, and I think I just want to be told, we love you, welcome.
Yeah.
So, but you're talking about something that's more process driven than, I feel great about supporting you.
Well, no, I think it's both, Giles.
Can it be both?
Yes, I think so.
Do your team make sure it's both?
That is what we would try to do, absolutely. And we're also we would also monitor, our calling. We send examples to the charities on a weekly basis. We monitor it ourselves from a kind of quality assurance point of view, and absolutely, they're I'll be completely honest. There would have been times where you might have a new caller working on the campaign. They haven't quite got the principle of what we're trying to do, and you will hear it immediately. And exactly as you say, someone who's quite been pretty good about or feeling really good about their decision, if suddenly they're met with just questions, then you start to doubt yourself. Well, what have I just done then? Why did I, why am I now starting to feel, unsure about what I'm doing? So absolutely, it has to remain, a very much a kind of positive communication. But that doesn't mean that, from positive communications, that certain information can't be, checked or certainly reinforced. So
this goes back to one of the things that we've just discussed before, and this is why I think these are so important, these types of calls, and it has to be two-way. It's just not your grade. But, we know from mystery shopping in the past that sometimes not any of the wonderful organisations that Dom has managed, but people will say at sign up, oh, you only have to do it for 6 months, or you only have to do it for a year. And that makes it easier, but it's not what a charity is looking for.
Absolutely.
So you need to have that as part of the process to make sure that the scripts that the charity are agreeing, the offer, the long-term potential is all fully understood. So, it has two purposes, but I think both are essential.
Yes, I agree. I'm not questioning that. If attrition is quite high in the months following the sign-up, it does seem to me, just from a logical fundraising point of view, that first call can be a major impact on the long-term lifetime value of the donor. If that call makes people feel, I was right to sign up, I went away from the sign up, not really sure, I might cancel. And if you actually I really feel good about the fact that I signed up, I've been made to feel a good person by signing up. That's going to massively impact the lifetime value of that donor.
Absolutely. Yeah, 1,000%.
This is new thinking for me, sorry.
Carry on, because I think it's all of those elements that are important. That if you are signing someone up, obviously when the more personal the communication, the harder it is in many ways to say no. Like we know that in effect, like something like press inserts or display advertising, it's a really hard way in. You've got to really want to give. You've got to fill out a form, you've got to find a stamp, you've got to go online. It's tough. And because of that, attrition is low, your second gift rate is high. On the street, you've got that person involved. Do I want to say to this lovely person who's working for charity, no, I'm not giving to that? And some people won't. As they get older, it's actually easier for them to say no. And I think this is obviously one of the things that we're seeing in reduction of attrition. If in the old days, at some points we were recruiting face-to-face sign-ups at 22, 23, and the attrition was really, really high. But if you're going in at 44, which is to my mind, the bottom eight, the real rock bottom of when you can start getting people, starting to engage throughout the giving years. I always think one of the best shows to fully understand why middle-aged people don't give money to charity is Motherland. If you look at Julia and you thought Julia in Motherland, how do we get her to sign up? In the chaos her life is going through, that's the issue. But as people start getting older, as children growing up, that's in a way when they move out of the sandwich generation. I think that's the good point. And I think one of the issues is if you are recruiting people mid-40s, you're starting to get into that zone where people are going to be around for some time, particularly as you're both mentioning, they've got a good experience of that sign up.
And you're talking about mid-40s as being quite a good age to start, because these are people who've got slightly more time on their hands. So if
some of them, Charles,
I know,
not me.
I'm still waiting for that.
And that's why I say rock bottom. Often we find a little dip that you will find people earning good money in their early 30s and suddenly they disappear because they've got married, they've got children, and suddenly everything's chaotic. And then they come back out of that market about 20 years later. But, some people don't have children. Some people, have plenty of money, have plenty of time. And,
chance will be a fine thing.
Indeed.
So, Dom, when someone's been signed up, would they know the name of the person who signed them up?
Yes.
They would? Okay. So when the next call comes in, would they actually say, Mrs. Smith, John so-and-so, so I'm Steve, and John has just told me that...
Yes,
they would.
Name
by name. So there'd be a...
not
a real person...
Oh, absolutely,
and another real person on the call.
There would be, a reference to that experience.
That feels to me to be so important, because that's where... It's in that process that everything can break down or not break down. If you can keep that up all the way through.
In the olden days, do you remember when we were doing thank yous?
Yeah.
We were doing thank yous from the person who signed them up.
Yeah.
So there was a thank you going out.
Yeah.
A named thank you from that person. Thanks for signing up. It was great speaking to you. And before the organisation technically got involved.
And that sounds to me like nirvana, because, every communication...
It'll be a Caribbean island for me.
every communication should leave them better after it before it. If you do that, then there should be no reason for them to cancel. So every experience makes them feel good. They feel good at being signed up. They feel good at the person, their phone. They feel good. Why would they cancel?
Yeah, absolutely.
They're constantly getting a good experience.
You're building trust at that point, and absolutely reinforcing that the positivity of the conversation. And you're absolutely right, Charles. If that communication doesn't happen, or if it's not handled well, then this could be the difference between, or it's likely to be the difference between 20% or more people cancelling at that point, either after one donation or maybe not making the donation at all, to it being kind of 10% or below. So then if you look at that then across, any fundraising campaign of any scale, that is going to have a very significant impact on your return on investment. So it's absolutely essential, both in terms of reputation, but obviously the the reality of the return on the investment as well.
Okay, so you're probably the wrong person to be asking this, because of ChatGPT, says that you're the bee's knees when it comes to all of this.
Oh, no,
I'm gonna put you through ChatGPT.
I don't do too badly. I've checked. So we've defined like an ideal scenario about how someone's approached on the street, how they're signed up, the communication, the engagement, etc. Then the follow-up phone call, how that's handled, making sure that information that's asked for is done in the context of a good process, etc. So that's how things should be done. What proportion of face-to-face contacts do you think are of that quality? Be real.
Oh yeah, no.
But right the way through from start to finish, what proportion of them would you say, yep, I'm okay with that, I'm proud of that, that's one of my people?
Well, in terms
not your people, but how
in terms of the world in general. Yeah, I mean, I can't really speak necessarily for the rest of the world kind of globally as such. I mean, I would say certainly within the UK, I would expect that the majority of agencies and or in-house charity operations would have good standards when it comes to when it comes to the welcoming onboarding of new donors, because ultimately it's very much in their interest to do so. And I don't want to sound kind of particularly hard about that, but there is a reality in that if you don't look after those people, then as I say, you will see if you show me attrition data across a number of campaigns, and some kind of variance in the results, it's very easy to kind of identify a list of where those what is influencing those results. So my experience is particularly now, it's never been a kind of an easy business or an easy game to be in, if you like. As I say, you have all of the variables that kind of working with human beings brings, both kind of positive and negative. It's never been easy to recruit people. It's not easy to kind of train, retain people. Get up every day with that, with a renewed sense of energy. If you're a face-to-face person, it's a bit like the old kind of football adage. You're only as good as your last game.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah.
And so you're only as good as your last shift. Your last day, and so and you can feel really, really pleased after that, or you can feel on the floor. But what you have to do is kind of get yourself up and get going again. Yeah. So I do think that and that's very much ingrained. Certainly in the UK market, but face-to-face is very much established on a global level now, and there are different challenges that that face different markets. But yeah, absolutely, in this country, those initial welcome communications and processes are well established. A little bit less so in other markets, but then it depends as well. In India, for instance, that initial communication is more likely to be WhatsApp based, because that's how they will engage, or how individuals there are more likely to engage, I should say. In other markets, it will be different again. So what's important, I think, for face to face as time goes on, and going back to that point of there needing to be a certain energy around, and focus on post sign up communications. And really understanding what has the most positive impact for all concerned.
And I think that it's to put some emphasis on that point. In every one of these sessions, Giles, what we normally end up talking about are post-donation experiences. And all of us have got a sense of frustration because we see what happens when people get it right, and we see what happens when people get it wrong. And I think that's the key point. It doesn't matter which route somebody's coming on board. It's all about that. Going back to your adage, should always leave people feeling better than before.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, I've learned a huge amount in the last hour and a quarter. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Giles.
And from you, Mark. I learn
pleasure.
from you, Mark, all the time.
Any other points that we've got to cover off? Because we've gone over the hour by some time.
yeah.
Sorry.
No,
it's
no.
your fault. It's fascinating.
It's really flown. We've not struggled at all to ask questions or get anything out. Anything that you'd want to highlight? The one standard point I would have is where do you think we're going next with face to face? Where would you like to go next? And then within that, any points that you'd like to make, and then we're going to give you a little chance to do an ad.
Okay. Look, I think. I think that. Undoubtedly, there are challenges that face to face has to deal with. That are very much real. In the here and now. It's. If you're going to employ people, if you're going to incentivize people, it doesn't really matter whether you're, employing people directly, whether you're paying them a day rate, whether you're paying them commissions. All of those things can be done well or badly, but they can all be done well. It's, when you're working in an environment whereby, it can be quite easy to go and get, relatively kind of casual labour, and be reasonably well paid for it, doing something a lot easier than face to face. That represents a challenge to, growing capacity, within the market and really kind of attracting people in the first place. But, I think the way that face to face can evolve is not necessarily to try and target being as big as it might have been, in those sort of earlier years, when we sort of started out with it. I don't think it needs to be necessarily, a million donors a year and then, kind of questions around sustainability and people, having too many approaches. I think the market can be bigger than it is now, very much sustainable, over the next couple of decades. And I think, with it can work very cohesively with the new technology that we see, both around payments, data, that ability to help you performance manage at the point of sign up or just post, to make those kind of changes to a campaign, to continue to look at different types of campaigns, whether that be, I mentioned that, the youth PWR example earlier, just around pure capacity building. We in COVID, we had teams of people going out delivering and collecting PCR test kits when they first came out. We used for kind of face to face in that way, or utilised it in that way. That then effectively enabled us to establish a public sector branch to what we do. So and that's still active today. We're out working at Stratford, Westfield over the weekend, encouraging people for an organisation called Our Future Health to take basic health tests, so that medical data can be built for medical researchers and people involved in disease prevention. So all of this is so rich in terms of the potential of the channel just beyond what may be the perception of regular giving, face-to-face fundraising. So I see great potential in all of these things, and all of that being able to continue to develop in this country. I think that the global market is very much alive. I think there's great enthusiasm in other parts of the world. Obviously I mentioned India. The face-to-face is becoming very strong in the United States, which was obviously traditionally more of a kind of telephone, direct mail based
Is that principally door, or are you doing it on the street as well?
A mix. Yeah. And it depends state by state.
Are you getting in shopping centres and things, or shopping malls as it's called?
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, look, I think there's obviously there's extensive operations in Europe, Latin America, obviously Southeast Asia, and further east. It's a I think a really interesting time now. If we look at the next decade for face to face, I think obviously in this country we can be a little bit myopic and just focus on what's in front of us, and as I say, maybe not always be as positive as we can be. But yeah, it's very much I think has the potential to be a very diverse, interesting space and very effective space continually. Over the next decade here and abroad, is what I would say. And
I think it's from that point, it's how we think creatively about how you start the relationship from that human interaction, which is you've made, Giles, it's often the best one. Yep. But where do we go next? And I think organisations that think, oh, I'm just going to get them in, I know that half of them are going to cancel. Yeah. Well, the half that stick around are sticking around in spite of what you're doing at that point. Yeah. And it's what can you do? And when we're looking at particularly the age at mid-40s, that's also a point where people are starting to consider their first legacy sign-ups, as, their first, writing their first will that a charity might appear in. Well, we know it's a long way off until you're actually really going in that final charitable will, but why not? Why not consider that? Why not give a gift to somebody doing your job in 40 years' time simply by thinking about giving that person a great experience now? Something might happen. They might have that child. They might enter the sandwich generation, as we call it, or the Julia generation for anyone who watches Motherland. They might disappear, but they may well come back. And that's the point. Yeah. It's a lifetime that we're looking at here, not just, oh, they've cancelled and they're gone forever, forget them. Yeah. We really have to consider how we bring people on board in a different way, and they may go in and out of our charities, but the better experience they had when they're in, the likelihood of them coming back, so much higher.
Absolutely.
Are we done?
Apart from the ads?
Apart from the ads. How do people get in touch with you, Dom, if they want to speak together, or are you just maxed out because obviously you're doing such a brilliant service?
Oh, well, of course we're always very busy, but we're always more than happy to talk to organisations, and even if we can, be of help, with advice initially. So no, I guess that the best route is probably just to look us up online. Gathercampaigns.com.
Gathercampaigns.com.
So yeah, and you should be able to contact us from there. But or look me up, dominic.will@gathercampaigns.com.
I found these. I just typed in gather, and it came up fairly easily in the search function.
There we go. Yeah, so gather campaigns. And you should be able to find us easily enough. But yeah, we're always happy to chat. And as I say, it's. There are many different ways now. Like I say, what I enjoy now, versus maybe 10 years ago, is I think there are certainly different opportunities, different ways to work with different organisations, through this channel, and I think that's a real strength and something that obviously keeps it fresh, enjoyable, motivating, which is great.
And certainly, if anyone is interested in face-to-face fundraising, you are the only people that they should think about.
Oh well, I that's not for me to say.
I can say it. And me, if you're still watching, it means you must be quite keen. I have quite a lot of fundraising experience, which I'd love to share with you if you think it might be helpful. I'm Giles at gilespegram.com, or just Google Giles Pegram. And Mark, how can you promote yourself?
My name's Mark. I have an agency called Blue Frog. I think the thing that I found, and I don't know if anyone out there would be interested, but we used to work very closely with Dom, and we did some great stuff many years ago. And I think if anyone's interested in looking at doing face-to-face, but face-to-face plus looking at bringing some of the experience that we've got at Blue Frog with digital, with DM, and as Dom's saying, increasingly looking at things like WhatsApp and how we can use that to give a better experience, that would be a lovely experiment. So if anyone's interested in that, a little bit of a three-way operation. And if you want to go for your multimillionaires, let's get Giles involved as well. But that would be great. And you know where you find me, hello at bluefroglondon.com, or is easy way to get in touch with us if it's any interest. But I think that's been fabulous. I've had a good session. Really good to touch base with Dom again, learn a little bit more about how face-to-face has evolved and how it should be used and how you can make it better. I think that was absolutely fabulous. I've had a really good, what have we been? Probably about an hour and a half now. So if you're sticking around, thank you very much. And thanks for watching.
Thank you, Giles. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks,
It's been a
Dom.
pleasure.
And again, thank you for watching.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And happy fundraising.